Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Andrew Yang and what the future of college education should be for Americans under his presidency. All right, so let's talk about it. All right, so the reason we're talking about this today is the Slate podcast, the Slate Political Gabfest podcast. Slate Political Gabfest podcast is a weekly political podcast. In my opinion, it truly is the best political commentary available today. It's absolutely free. It stars John Dickerson, Emily Bazelon, and David Plotz. They talk for an hour. They go over the best and coolest and brightest moments of politics each week, and the show is fantastic. It's a mainstay for me, and I've listened to it for over a decade. I've seen the Slate Political podcast, Slate Political Gabfest podcast recorded no less than half a dozen times live in different cities. I love it. I'm a huge fan, right? So they recently had a guest on by the name of Paul Tough. And Paul Tough talked about his new book. And his new book is The Years That Matter Most. And the entire point of this book is to talk about why there are so few poor students in elite schools. All right, so for the rest of this video, I'm going to say college. But when I say college, I mean colleges and universities throughout America. When I say college, I mean the college and university educational system, okay? When I say elite schools, those are like Ivy League schools, right? And a little beyond the Ivy League schools. So we'll go through this. All right, so basically, Paul Tough was like, it was a really great show. So, and he did a summary and he talked at length about what's in his book. And he was saying, hey, this is the problem that we have today, right? That there are incredibly few poor students in elite schools. But he went further. He's like, oh, this isn't us just bringing this topic up now. This has been a topic for 20 years, right? And for 20 years, we've continued to try to do these, to bring these good solutions forward for America to have these poor students in elite schools, right? And the solutions have failed. For 20 years, even after the problem was identified, we are still looking at a situation where the elite schools have incredibly few poor students in these elite schools, right? And then he also, went and explained how this is a bad problem, because when you go into an elite school, when you go into a Harvard or a Yale, right? If you go into any Ivy League school, it transforms your life, and it becomes a launching pad for you to do these incredible things. And increasingly, right? And actually, it might not be increasingly, but continuingly, this has been continuing to be for these elite schools are for the following people. They are for they're for the children of wealthy. They're for legacies, right? They're for athletes, right? And the last one is a little suspect. He also listed one of actually I think it was David Plotz listed academic superstars, and I think that's a freighted term, right? And that's an entire I could do an entire video on that subject, but I'm not even going to touch it today. It's too volatile, right? All right, so we'll keep moving forward here. And so the reality is, one, Paul Tough talked about this, and he said, here's the reason why there are so few poor students in elite schools. And first and foremost, he said the schools don't want them, right? Like he said, that's one reason, right? And the Slate Political Gabfest hosts, they drew him out, and they're like, what do you mean they don't want them? And he's like, these schools, these Ivy League schools, they are they benefit from a hierarchy, right? And frankly, if you have if you're picking your students, right, you could maintain that hierarchy, right? It was really interesting, very honest answer, right? So then it goes further, and he said the second reason is low SATs. That when they go to get these poor students, and he said that essentially when you go to get poor students to bring them into these schools, the SATs are too low, right? This is Paul Tough saying this, right? And then, so you have this low SAT situation, and and the fact that the schools don't want them. And the last one is the elite schools break up into two groups. There are a number of schools that have so much money they could bring in almost as many students as they wanted from they could bring in as many poor students as they wanted, right? But they don't, because the SATs are low and because they don't want them. But there is a significant number of schools that need the tuition, right? So Harvard and Yale, like, they have absolutely massive, like, backstops of money. Like, they have these funds, and those funds sit there, and they're billions and billions and billions of dollars. And those schools could do whatever they want, right? But Paul Tough made it super clear that that's not the case with all of America, right? And that there are these elite schools that are very much do not have the money they need and they need tuition, right? So they actually need tuition, right? So that's a significant concern, and they really need to actually deal with that, right? So he laid it out, and he's like, these are the reasons that these schools don't have, these are the reasons that poor students aren't in these schools, right? So, all right, I want to talk a little bit about what he had to say. So one, and then, of course, because the Slate Political Gabfest hosts are fantastic, they said, what's the solution, right? And then Paul Tough went on a big blah, 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 right? He went, oh, this is a really complicated situation, and the college system is bifurcated, and this solution would be good to solve this part, and this solution would be good to solve this part, and this solution, and it blew my mind, right? So Paul Tough is in my opinion clearly an academic, or he's strongly influenced by academics, and this continues to blow my mind. If you write a book, right, more and more of these I feel like academics is definitely a problem in America, right? In that, with academics, they like to point at problems, right? And I will tell you right now, I am getting very tired of reporters, academics, authors who point at problems and don't have any solutions. And I will say there's a ton of academics, reporters, and authors who think it's enough to point at a problem. No, if you've been thinking about this for 3 years and you've taken the time to read a book, and you cannot give an elevator pitch for what the answer is, what was the point of your work? And I really felt that Paul Tough couldn't do that. I listened to this podcast yesterday. Today, I can't give you a summary of what he had to say, because he was all over, right? He didn't have a real answer, right? And I think the reason why is many academics, reporters, and media types, they're like, hey, and by the way, I'm going to give you my elevator speech for what the real issue is, for what the real answer is, very shortly. Basically, people think it's enough to point at a problem. It's not. You need to bring a solution, right? And I don't even care if your solution's wrong, right? You can have a wrong solution, because that keeps the conversation going. But if you have no solution to a problem you're pointing at, what is the point of you? What is the point of your work? Why are you here? Move on, right? It just frustrates me a lot. And I really feel like Paul Tough had spent all this time researching and all this time, doing all this, and then failed at the end and did not give an elevator pitch of, hey, this, a 15-second solution saying, this is how you solve this, right? And push people, if you're going to take the time to do the research, develop a call to action, right? It's so common, it makes so much common sense, and so few people do it, it drives me nuts, all right? So what is the solution to all this, right? So one, right now, I'm going to do an Andrew Yang pushback. I already know what Andrew Yang believes about this. Andrew Yang believes that we do have problems in the college system, right? He acknowledges everything Paul Tough says. And what he wants to do is he wants to make it so that we fix the problem of people who are not going to college, right? And that we make a safe and good environment for people who have not gone to college, right? And I'm going to give my solution today, and this is a pushback against Andrew Yang. I'm placing this here for Andrew Yang and his team, and I hope that once he is president, he will pick this up and deal with this in H2 of year 1 of his presidency, right? And here is my solution. All right, so my solution is this country needs to stop pretending that college is not the whole ball of wax. Yes, Paul Tough is right. We have huge problems in our college system, and not enough poor students have been given what they need to go into college, right? Now, here's how I would solve this. In my opinion, America at the macro level, right? America at the government level needs to abandon all physical labor for American citizens. No American citizen should ever do any physical labor again, and we should make that happen in 20 years, right? Now, I know I can hear you. You're like, well, wait, Scott, who's going to do the physical labor? Robots, right? I love Andrew Yang's down with robots stance, right? And I know he has a more nuanced stance than that. I'm encapsulating it, right? And basically, one, we could just insult robots by saying your job is going to be to pick up our stocks, chop our logs, stock our shelves, scan our items when we buy something. All physical labor in America should be done by robots. No American citizen ever again, 20 years from now, should ever do any physical labor. The entire nation, every single American citizen should bachelor up, right? You get a bachelor or above, right? And you got to pay for it. You got to go through the regular system. I'm not for free college or any of that stuff, right? You got to go through the system. You got to get debt, right? But I don't believe in the boogeyman of the person who paid for college and now is having a tough time getting a job, right? People, it's a boogeyman. I just don't believe in it, right? Now, I do understand that people have a tough time getting the job they want, right? But if you have a college degree, you're going to be able to get a job, right? That's just a fact, right? And, oh, yes, you may have some college debt, but guess what? It's the most structured debt in the world, and there's more systems to deal with it than virtually any other kind of debt. It's not really, it's a boogeyman. It's not a real problem. It's a monster under the bed that is being sold by the media, okay? So here's the thing, right? Every single America, bachelor's up. You have a bachelor's, you have a master's, you have a PhD or above. Absolutely no American should not have a college degree. And to take it further, every single American should be a knowledge worker. Physical labor should be done by robots only. Robots only, right? Now, why should we do this, okay? Now, this might seem harsh for me saying this, but this is not harsh. This is actually very caring and very kind. I am sick to death of what we actually do in America, right? And I will tell you, my people, my own people, all right? Evangelical Christians are some of the absolute worst at this, right? So, every single week, all right, I go to my church and somebody, actually, I guess it's every other week, maybe every other 3 weeks. Some evangelical Christian in the pews is like, oh my gosh, one of my friends' friend has a communication degree. They paid $120,000 for it, and I wish they had just became a welder, because we need welders in this country, and physical labor is really important, right? And you know what we pay? We pay physical labor for in America, and I'm so sick to death of this. I'm so sick to. And by the way, the person who said this, I'll say, oh hey, Evangelio, so you're really down with welders, right? Where's your kid right now? Is your kid learning to weld? Oh no, my kid's over at Penn State U. Of course they are, right? Yeah. So your idea of physical labor being so noble and a wonderful idea for the country, but not for your kid, right? It's always a great idea for somebody else's kid, right? But the reality is, here's the issue. Our country does not. You know what our country pays for physical labor with? A smittens, a little bit of cash. We throw at them in change. It doesn't pay. It doesn't pay. It doesn't pay. And then you know what it really pays for? It pays for thumbs up and noble thoughts. Everybody's like, oh boy, people who cut down trees and make and put together cords of wood. That's the best, most noble work. And you know what it is? It is noble work. It should be respected. It's not. It's not paid for. And what happens if you make your life cutting down trees is you make good money for 20 years, your body falls apart, and now you have no skill sets for the second 20 or 30 years of your career, right? We are being very being very unkind and very cruel to people in this country, singing this song and dance that physical labor is actually going to pay and give you a lifelong career. It doesn't. It doesn't. In America, we pay physical labor with change, right? The money you're going to get for physical labor is going to be thrown at you in coins, right? And then the rest of your pay is going to be noble thoughts and thumbs up, right? It does not pay, right? And I, for one, am sick to death of everybody shaking their head and saying how noble physical labor is, and then kids actually believe this and go down the road of getting welding jobs and find out that actually, and Paul Tuff confirmed this yesterday, the actual labor jobs, the actual welding jobs that everybody promised was going to pay $40 an hour, pay $12 or $15 an hour, right? It is a serious problem. And the reality is we can fix this by making all physical labor in America within 2 decades done by robots. No American citizen should be anything but bachelor above in education. And in addition to that, it should absolutely be all knowledge workers. All knowledge workers. All knowledge workers. And the reason why is America's the dopest country in the world, right? If anybody can get robots to do the physical stuff, it's us. Now, how do we do this? Right? Well, Yang can do this, right? But through three ways: taxes, laws, and inspiration. He can apply taxes, and so basically any and all robots that don't do physical labor, they get taxed highly, right? The laws for them will be arcane and difficult to follow, right? And then inspiration. He will use his political speech to encourage people to create physical robots to create robots that do our physical labor. And by the way, what do I mean when I say a robot? Here's a robot. Any algorithm, it's a robot. Any machine that is like a single arm that's controlled by a piece of software, right? But it doesn't have a body, that's a robot. Anything that has legs and arms and walks around, that's a robot. Anything that's an android that looks exactly like a human being, but that's all gizmos and gears, that's a robot, right? And frankly, we should be transitioning we should be transitioning a significant portion of our economy to make robots that will do our physical labor. And in my opinion, within 20 years, no American should ever have to do any physical labor. We should be a country of the most super dope, super educated knowledge workers that are on the planet, right? Because it's just how we roll, right? And the reality is, it's the only thing we respect anymore. It's the only thing we pay for. And if you think I'm wrong, I'm going to quote you Fight Club from over 30 years ago, right? People who work sitting down make more than people who work standing up. That's not my opinion. That's Chuck Powaliukinik's opinion. Sorry, I massacred that name. But all the rest of it is my opinion, and I'd love to hear your opinion. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.